Scott, let's start with the attacks, U.S. Saudi attack on Iraq, and it was on PMF, one which is part of the Iraqi army. It's not part of the resistance in Iraq. And just moments ago, we had the Iraqi National Security Council condemning what has happened, and they said they're trying to do their best to avoid these sort of difficulties between Iraq and neighboring countries. And it said Donald Trump today said that they coordinated this attack with the Prime Minister of Iraq, which was in this statement. It was rejected somehow because it said the council said the strikes occurred while they said that the attacks, they were trying to talk with the Americans in order to find the problem, to just only with Americans, with Saudis as well, just to understand the problem there, because it was, Saudi said it was a drone attack on their soil, on their facilities, oil facilities. Then they were trying to resolve that issue. Then the United States attacked them. It was somehow a surprise attack, but Donald Trump said they have coordinated that with the Prime Minister of Iraq. How do you see the situation in Iraq and the difficulties or the problem that Saudi Arabia is making for itself? They had a war with Yemen. Right now, they have opened a new front, and somehow believing that the United States is going to be there to do these attacks. But after all, they have to have some sort of strategy. Do you see any sort of understanding what is your take on what's going on in Iraq, for example, which is so important right now? The funeral is going on, by the way. The funeral of those people who were killed, assassinated in these attacks, is going on in Iraq as we talk.
I mean, this is just a prime example of the dysfunction that exists when it comes to U.S. policy in the Persian Gulf region and in the Middle East altogether. It also shows the chaos and confusion that exists in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, about what their role is and what's expected of them. The Saudis are very concerned about being overtaken by Iran as a regional superpower. But the fact is, Iran is a regional superpower and Saudi Arabia is not. Saudi Arabia wouldn't be doing any of the things it's doing in Yemen or in Iraq if it weren't for American backing. Iran acts independently. And American backing is no guarantee of success, as we've seen. What we have here is an example of Saudi Arabia trying to achieve strategic goals and objectives in Yemen by sustaining a blockade of Ansarallah, the Houthi, and encouraging violent action against Ansarallah by Saudi proxies in Yemen. When people speak of the axis of resistance, they need to understand that it's real. It's not imaginary. It's not fictitious. That means that there are organizations and nations that, have commonality of purpose when it comes to security. And so when the Ansarallah or the Houthi are attacked and threatened by Saudi Arabia, there are allies who will respond in kind. And this is what's happened. I don't know if the PMF was involved in the strikes. I would doubt that they were because, as you said, they're part of the Iraqi army. But there are numerous militias that are outside of the framework of direct Iraqi government control who have the capacity to launch attacks against Saudi Arabia, and I believe did launch attacks against Saudi Arabian oil facilities. But what does Saudi Arabia expect? I mean, you don't get to exist in a vacuum. You don't get to go around and do something here and expect nothing to happen there. So they've basically uncorked a genie of violence, and they're not going to be able to put that genie back in the bottle. This ends badly for Saudi Arabia. This ends very badly for Saudi Arabia because all they did is kill. I think they killed 8 Iraqi PMF members and 5 Iranian IRGC advisors. That's not a fatal blow. I mean, it's tragic for the families involved, but the notion that this somehow, blunted what was going on. First of all, they hit the wrong target. That's the other thing. The intelligence of the United States is not creative in this fashion, and we hit the wrong target. We didn't hit the targets responsible for the strikes. And the other thing is, all we did is alienate Iraq against us. So we didn't get the approval of the Iraqi government. A phone call was made to the Iraqi prime minister in which these issues were discussed. And then that was taken as concurrence. And then we struck. This just undermines an Iraqi prime minister whose hold on power is already tenuous. Recall that he didn't win the last parliamentary election. He's appointed by the United States. There was a different outcome, but we wouldn't allow that outcome because we deemed it to be more sympathetic to Iran than what we wanted. So we've already manipulated the domestic political affairs of Iraq. We've been doing so ever since we invaded and overthrew Saddam Hussein. And now we've done this. Who knows what this will trigger? I mean, this could very well trigger a military uprising against the prime minister and his ouster from power. I mean, because as you said, the PMF is part of the Iraqi military. And the National Security Council saying, we didn't approve this. The prime minister is saying, I did. But the point is, why did the United States feel comfortable making a phone call to the prime minister to begin with? Because they think he is their paid boy. And that reality is he is their paid boy. There would have been a response that the Iraqi prime minister could have given, a nationalized televised conference saying, I've received a phone call from the United States and I'm going to give my response in public. No, hell no. Don't even think about it. Instead, he hemmed and hawed, remained in silence, took everybody by surprise, and the United States carried out this attack. The man's a moral and intellectual coward. He's a political failure. And hopefully his days are numbered because he's not good for Iraq. Saudi Arabia, all they did is guarantee that their already exposed oil fields will be struck again. And another thing that people have to keep in mind is Iran's not out of the picture. There is no ceasefire. Let's stop pretending. If there was a ceasefire, then Iran wouldn't have launched missiles against Jordan. Iran will do what Iran needs to do. The IRGC has already said there is no ceasefire, and as needed, we will do what is required. And now that Saudi Arabia has attacked, a neighboring nation, Iraq, Iran may very well come to their assistance. If the non-aligned pro-Iranian militias now engage directly Saudi Arabia in open conflict, Iran could very well side with them. And then Saudi Arabia disappears as a modern nation state. The perfumed, fat, obese princes that currently occupy the senior positions of the Saudi leadership will, find themselves with no oil-based income. And maybe then the Bedouins will grow a pair of testicles and rise up and behead them. Something. But, the Saudi leadership is not good for Saudi Arabia. They care only about themselves. People need to, delve into the lifestyle of these people. Go to Bahrain, for instance, and it's tough right now because it's getting shelled. But back before it was shelled, just take a look at what's happened in Bahrain. What was the nightlife like? Who's driving the nightlife? It's all the pious Saudis and their royalty running there. The royalty flies to London. Go on that airplane. Watch how when they cross the Saudi national boundaries, they strip out of their airplane, out of their clothes, start dressing in the most wild Western clothes. They land in London, and the debauchery that takes place in London is beyond belief. What the men do there is recorded by British intelligence, and what the women do is recorded by British intelligence, and they're all co-opted, and they go back, and now they have files that they can never talk about because what they do is unspeakable, and they go back and they put their clothes on, they pretend they're pious. When you get off the causeway connecting Bahrain to Saudi Arabia, you'll see mosque after mosque after mosque after mosque. Why? Because the sinful Saudis, as they come through, believe that by building a mosque or funding a mosque, they've somehow absolved themselves of the sin until the next time they go to Bahrain. This is who is governing Saudi Arabia today. They only care about their narcissistic well-being. They don't care about the Saudi people. They don't care about the region. And their narcissism can only be funded by the continued production of oil. And so this is all about how they keep the oil flowing, and they've bought into the false premise that the United States is a guarantor of continued Saudi oil production capacity. It's not. I'm not here to encourage global economic catastrophe, but right now Saudi Arabia could be literally wiped from the planet. All Nasrallah has to do is press forward its attacks and destroy the totality of Saudi Arabia's oil production infrastructure. All the Iranian militias have to do in the pro-Iranian militias in Iraq is press forward the attack and destroy the totality of Saudi Arabia's oil production capacity within range. And then Iran just comes and cleanups the mess. The eastern Saudi oil fields exist in an area where there's a prominent or dominant Shia population. Maybe it's time for the Shia to rise up, march on Riyadh, take care of the business. I mean, this Saudi regime has to go. It has to go. It's bad for Saudi Arabia. It's bad for the regime. And by participating in this blatant attack against Iraq, they set themselves up for failure.
Do you think, Scott, when it comes to the response from Iraq, I assume that Yemen would do something about it? Because if we assume that these drones came from Iraq, how do you see the combination of the two, drones from Iraq and missiles from Yemen? And what do we know about the air defense systems in Saudi Arabia?
What do we know about the air defense systems in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
I don't know. Aren't there a couple Saudi oil fields that are burning? Now we know about the Saudi air defense systems. They don't work. That's it. And so, as I said, Saudi Arabia is laid naked
when you
right
go
now.
that far, you have to understand repercussions of what you're doing. It doesn't seem, I don't know what are they thinking of with these attacks.
When you look, the reality of the Gulf Arab region is be exposed. We tend to believe that these are rational thinking human beings because they put on a facade of civility, a facade of civilization paid for by the oil that they produce, the oil that the West buys. And so they'll go out and they'll build a Louvre lookalike. That happened in Abu Dhabi. Go to the Louvre. Don't have to go to Paris. Just come right here to Abu Dhabi, and you can have the same culture that you have in Paris. Go to Dubai, and you've got the great towers, and you got the party life, and you got all that. So it's just like the West. It's just like the West, except it's ruled by the most perverted, corrupted class of human beings in mankind. Gulf Arab princes. These aren't good people. These are simply people who are in the right place at the right time when the British Empire collapsed and Great Britain anointed them to be the neo-colonial masters of the Gulf responsive to England. I was in Abu Dhabi. I met the British advisor of the Crown Prince, and he is an MI6 operative. I just gave away one of the best secrets everybody knows about. Next to every Saudi prince, next to every Gulf Arab prince, next to every sheikh is a CIA or MI6 controller that controls everything they do and monitors everything they do. I was trying to have a conversation with him about Iran's nuclear program and how at that time Abu Dhabi was talking about a peaceful nuclear program. And I had an idea about how maybe they could do a uranium enrichment consortium to absorb the Iranian enrichment with the Abu Dhabi and therefore legitimize enrichment, control enrichment. We wouldn't have the problem we have today. And he was interested until the British MI6 operative interceded. And so that's a conversation we're not having right now. It's not a sovereign state, is it? This is the reality. You're expecting rational behavior from Saudi Arabia. There is no rational behavior from Saudi Arabia. It is a corrupt regime. Everything about it is corrupt from the top to the bottom because there's just so much money pouring in there. And so they disguise their ineptitude. They disguise their corruption. They disguise their depravity by wrapping themselves in, comfort, by wrapping themselves in riches. But once you peer through that, you lift it up and you look into it, it is ugly. It is grotesque. And what you're seeing right now is the foreign policy manifestation of this ugliness and grotesqueness. They don't know what they're doing. They are panicked right now in an absolute state of panic. And in their panic, they're turning to the United States for their salvation. And that's going to be one of the fatal mistakes of the Saudi monarchy.
Yeah. You mentioned the Iranian attack on Jordan last night, and at the same time, they were attacking some targets in Iraqi Kurdistan as well. And what do we know? This is the first time Iran is attacking Jordan without being attacked. This is something.
No, we need to correct that record, Nima, because that implies that somehow the United States didn't launch a surprise attack against Iran back on February 28th. All right. That implies that the United States didn't unilaterally violate the memorandum of understanding and the ceasefire and initiate armed aggression against Iran. You see, there's no ceasefire. Iran's never agreed to a ceasefire. So it's continuity of action. Iran didn't attack the United States void of cause. The war continues from the Iranian perspective. They didn't say quit. They didn't start it, and it ain't over yet. So let's not pretend that somehow Iran launched a surprise attack. Iran didn't launch a surprise attack. Iran continues to defend its interests. And what it did is detect activity at a Jordanian airbase about airstrikes that were getting ready launched against PMF forces. And so they launched a preemptive strike, not a surprise attack, but a continuity of violence that was initiated solely by the United States. That's what happened. It's not a surprise attack. It's not perfidy. It's not Iran playing games. Iran is at war against the United States. And you have to keep that in mind when you talk about what Iran's potential future options will be, because there is no ceasefire. Iran can hit anything it's already hit anytime it wants to hit with full knowledge that it's doing the right thing.